Summer, let's talk reptiles. So this is the second time that I've tried to record this video. The first time, I didn't really like it. I thought it could have been better. So here I am recording again. Super new to this podcast process, and I'm learning as I go. So there's going to be glitches. Yeah, we're learning together, man. This podcast is all about reptiles, the ins and outs of keeping reptiles, how to do so in a way that's ethical and just awesome, how to be a really good reptile community member, all of that good stuff. We're going to have tough conversations about topics that we really need to be talking about as an industry and a hobby, covering things that a lot of the other podcasts don't touch on. If you're interested in that, follow along. There's going to be a whole lot of useful educational content, a whole lot of entertaining content, a whole lot of controversy. There is a gnat flying around. So if you're into all of that, please follow along, listen, give us a subscribe, all of that good stuff, right? So today's episode is all about knowing what your whys are when it comes to keeping reptiles, like knowing what your motivations are, knowing what those things are that like influence or inform the decisions you make when it comes down to keeping reptiles. We're talking about the decisions that reptile keepers make, whether or not they are influenced by the needs of the animals, the needs of the keeper, or a little bit of both. Let's get into it. So I want to start by like laying out plain and simple what my motivations are as a keeper. I am really into science. I'm a science geek. It's one of the things that I really love about keeping reptiles. I've never had a cat or a dog where I was like, let me figure out what your native home range is and learn about the ecological history and the terrain. Like I've never done that with a cat or a dog, and I'm pretty sure no one else or very few people have either, right? But with reptiles, for me, I feel like that is one of the most, or there's many awesome parts, but one of the awesome parts about keeping reptiles, getting to look into the science of their natural history, the science of their needs, and having that inform the types of decisions that I make with the way that I keep them. So one of my motivations, I'm a total science geek, and I really love that aspect of keeping reptiles. My other motivation, I am really conscious of animal welfare. And I know that could be like, don't go there, don't say that. But that's what I feel. I'm really motivated by animal welfare, and I will go as far as thinking about the rights of the animals. And I know within our community, that idea of animal rights, and like it's a dirty word and a dirty concept. And we're going to talk about that in a different episode a little bit later. But I do believe that this is a thing, and it's a thing that we should be considering. The idea of the welfare of the animals, like for me, like top priority, and also like thinking about the rights of the animal. Like these are sentient creatures. So those are two of my motivations. And then my last motivation, I'm an aesthetically oriented human being. I am. And that plays a role in the decisions that I make. My enclosures, first and foremost, I design them in a way where it is going to function to meet and exceed the animal's needs, but I also want them to be beautiful. So my three main things that I think about that go into helping me decide how and when and where, the types of decisions I'm going to make when it comes down to keeping my animals, are those three things. I think about the natural science, the welfare of the animals, and aesthetics. That's what I'm into. Now, I'm not saying that to like bash or down anyone else and how they keep their animals. I say that to say that we are all individuals as humans, and with everything in our lives, every decision that we make, it is motivated by something. Those decisions that we are making are motivated by something. The way that we keep our reptiles is no different. Those decisions are motivated by something. And in order for us to understand our own behavior and why we do the things that we do, we have to have a clear understanding of what is it that is influencing the decisions that we're making around our animals. And that whole thing is a bigger picture in so many different ways. For example, those are my motivations. And let's touch on another controversial topic, keeping snakes and animals in racks, right? That is one of the big arguments in our community. Is rack keeping right? Is rack keeping wrong? And a lot of folks say, these arguments, they get really heated because there's people that are at the core of it. It's just people who love animals and they're all fighting from the same place. I don't think that that's true. Now, I'm not saying that rat keepers don't love their animals. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I don't think it's true that we're all having these fights and these arguments coming from the same place, because we all have different motivations for the way that we make the decisions around our animals, around the animals that we keep, around the way that we keep and set those animals up. So I don't think that that is factual, that we are coming from the same core place. It's we're humans. I think it's factually impossible. We're not a monolith. Humans are complex and complicated, right? So I bring that up to say that for me, the things that motivate me in the way that I keep my animals, the decisions that I make within the way that I design their enclosures, is probably very different from the decisions and the motivations that someone makes that keeps their animals in racks, right? I was listening to a podcast, what is it called? The Holdback Rack. And those guys breed ball pythons and I think corn snakes and a lot of other stuff. But it was last year when we were in the heat of the rack argument, and they made a really good point. And they were basically saying, I'm going to paraphrase. They were basically saying, do we think keeping these animals in racks is the best way to keep them? And they're like, no, but it's the most economic way to do it, et cetera, et cetera. What they were expressing in that conversation on their podcast, they were touching on what their motivations are, what influences the decisions that they make and the way that they keep their animals, right? And I think oftentimes when we get into these arguments, it's arguing without taking into consideration why certain keepers are making those decisions. Me making my decisions based on what I've already shared with you, trying to fight with someone who is making their decisions based on totally different reasons, we're going to hit a wall and clash. We're not going to come to a common ground. So I think it's important for us as individuals to first figure out what is motivating the decisions that I am making when it comes to keeping my animals, right? Why do I keep reptiles at all? What motivates that? For me, I'm really interested in the natural behaviors of the animals. I want to see that. And I can't see those natural behaviors, observe those natural behaviors if I'm keeping my animals in a rack. And I also can't observe those natural behaviors if I'm not giving them a natural setting to perform those behaviors in. Right? For example, my number one favorite species of reptile to keep are Uromastyx. Uromastyx like to burrow. I can't witness that burrowing behavior if I have them in an enclosure on paper towels or puppy pads or tiles or something. I can't witness that behavior. And for me, that's a detriment. I am not getting to fully experience some of the reasons why I like to keep those animals. So I'm not going to make the decision to keep my animals in racks because of those interests that I have. right? But for folks that do make that decision, they may have different motivations. One of them, it's clear and easy to see that it's like an economy of space. If you are keeping your animals in racks, then you have so much room to like maximize the number of animals that you have. And potentially, if you're a rack keeper, maybe that's one of your motivations, one of the reasons why you keep animals in racks, right? And we go back and forth and we have these fights, and I think it's going to be really difficult for us to come to any type of common understanding if, one, as individuals, we don't understand the reasoning behind the decisions that we make. We haven't touched on that. And two, we approach people only from the purview of why we make our decisions, our own personal motivations, and without any interest in trying to hear or know what their motivations are so that we can have productive conversations, right? Now, you may be able to guess from my style of keeping that I'm not going to say I'm anti-rack, but I'm not really for it. It's like, and that is me speaking from my particular viewpoint when it comes to keeping animals. I'm not pro-rack. And like, do I think there's like no place for rack in our community? No, I don't think that that's the case. But do I think that it is the best way to keep these animals that come from like historically and according to their natural history comes from like wide open areas, plains, savannas, deserts, forests, jungles, blah, blah, blah? No, I don't. Do I think these animals are dying in racks that are set up properly, that's meeting their basic needs? No, I don't, right? I think that the animals can live in these setups just fine and reproduce just fine and eat just fine. Do I think they're thriving? No, I don't. That's my personal perspective. Don't come for me. Talk to me though. If you want to be a part of the conversation, please get in the comments. Let's talk about this, right? That is me sharing my perspective based on my motivations as a keeper, the reasons behind the decisions that I make, right? So like, as a community, if we can't look at our own reasoning and like make sure we have a solid understanding of the reasoning behind the decisions that we make, and like also approach others with the clear understanding that they are going to have different reasons behind the decisions that they make, and then have conversations from that middle ground, then we're never going to get to a place where we can understand each other, man. Like, we're going to stay like, oh, that style of keeping is wrong, and that style of keeping is like not best for the animals. And we're never going to be able to have an actual real productive conversation. And people who keep in racks are going to feel bashed and belittled and like dismissed by folks who keep like in terrarium, vivarium style enclosures. And they're going to like dismiss it and feel bad, or potentially have the place to feel bad about the way that they keep. And I saw someone comment it was like last year at some point, where it was a screenshot of someone was like, oh, like another terrarium keeper just made me feel bad about me keeping in racks. And like, am I judgmental? A little bit. I'm a human, man. Yeah, like I have my viewpoint. I have my perspective. Like, yeah, I'm a little judgmental. Like, all of us are a little judgmental, right? And it's really hard for me not to like look at situations from my purview and be like, that's whack, right? We're human beings, right? I'm a human being. Like, I do things in that way, you know? But I would never want someone to feel like so just utterly shut down by my comments or the way that I approach them that we can't engage in a meaningful conversation about it. Like, I don't want that to happen, right? And like each of us, it's also important to know that we have our own individual baggage, right? Like, I've seen other people's vivariums and felt bad about what my vivariums are like. That doesn't have anything to do with that person's vivarium or that person. That's me, man. That's me internalizing feelings based on how they keep and how I think I should be keeping differently. It's my own shame and guilt coming in there doing its thing, right? And so like, there's so much about ourselves as individuals, I think, that we need to understand first before we can engage in these conversations as a whole community. And we got to be honest and transparent with ourselves, and then also honest and transparent about like with the world around us, you know? And I think as breeders, it's really important that we understand this more than anyone else, right? For like, I see a lot of breeders that will breed their animals, they keep them in racks, they keep their babies in racks, and they put very little effort into acclimatizing those animals to a situation outside of a rack. So then they go to a pet home and they put their animals in a setup that fits how they want to keep their animals. They want to observe their animals. They want to see their natural behavior. Like, we have a couple of rescue ball pythons, adopted ball pythons at home. And man, watching those animals explore their enclosures is so cool. We open the door of their enclosures and they just come on out and just explore the room, climbing up different surfaces, like getting as high as they can, going under. Like, it is such a cool experience to watch those animals do that behavior. And I'm just mind blown by it because ball pythons are an animal you can do that with because one, they're not super fast. So like if I did that with say my garter snakes, like they would be gone like lightning and I would never find them again, you know? So ball pythons are really cool in that way that you can witness all of this cool behavior that they can do if you provide them the space to do it. And as a breeder, if you're only like acclimatizing your animal to one situation and they go to a pet home where they want to be able to witness some of this awesome behavior that ball pythons can engage in, and the animal is not thriving or doing well in that situation because they've never been introduced to it, they've only been kept in one certain type of way, then you're failing your customers as a breeder. And yeah, I said it straight up, man. Like, you gotta make sure that as a breeder, you're giving your animals the best possible chance out in the world in the different types of scenarios that they're gonna live in. And like, if you're a rat keeper and you're ignoring the fact that there are going to be people out there with different motivations for how they're going to make decisions around their animals, they're going to be informing their decisions through different ways and different reasons, then like, you're not doing a justice to the animals you're producing or to our community as a whole. I said it. That's how I feel. Like, and those feelings, those thoughts, that opinions, please know it's based on my perspective, my purview as a keeper, as a reptile business owner, and as a breeder, man. Plain and simple. So I think as a community, in order for us to have these conversations productively, we really have to think about the whole picture. We have to be more holistic. We have to understand, as I already said, our reasons behind things, other people's reasons behind things, meet each other in a middle ground as a summary of this whole conversation that we just had. And like, as a breeder, we also have to understand the potential reasons and like motivations our customers are going to have, and making sure that well-rounded, just good customer service, that we are doing a good job of like preparing our animals to encounter and live in those different situations.